Alpen Pharmaceuticals in association with Higher Secondary Principals Forum.
Good morning, students. My name is Leona Fernandez, a teacher in biology at Carmel High Secondary School, Novem. Today, we are going to be starting with the first chapter in biology. Let us start. I want you to understand a statement that I will make now. Biology is the only science where multiplication means the same as division. Isn't it so? Yes. It is so because we have a life process, a fundamental life process called reproduction, where you see the same, multiplication and division, which means one and the same thing. Unit 6 in your biology syllabus is reproduction, in which we have 4 chapters. The first chapter is reproduction in organisms. In this chapter today, we are going to be discussing what is reproduction, the types of reproduction, and we are also going to be understanding certain terms in this chapter which will be beneficial for you in understanding the next 2 chapters in this unit. Besides this, we will also be dealing with the events involved in sexual reproduction. So, what is reproduction? In simple words, you can see over here, reproduction is a biological process in which an organism gives rise to young ones or offsprings of its own kind or similar to its own kind. That is important. So reproduction, again, is a biological process in which an organism gives rise to young ones or offsprings similar to itself. So why is reproduction necessary? Have you ever given it a thought? Is reproduction necessary? Yes, it is necessary. Now, before I go into making you understand why reproduction is necessary, let us try to understand a term known as lifespan. Now, every individual that comes or every organism that comes on the earth has a particular time period known as the lifespan. So, lifespan is the period between birth and natural death. So there are organisms which have a very short lifespan, and there are some organisms which also have a very long lifespan. To list out some of them, you can see over here, you have this insect known as the mayfly. It's an animal belonging to the phylum Arthropoda, and this particular animal or the insect, it has just 1 day lifespan. That means just 24 hours. Besides this, you have in animal kingdom the organism or the animal which lives the longest. One particular creature is the bow-headed whale. It can live for about 250 years also. In plants, you have trees which can go up to several years. You have the banyan tree, you have the sequoia tree also. This sequoia tree, as you can see, can live for about 4,000 years. And you have a list of the other organisms also put up, which have a particular duration of lifespan. So, getting back to the question, why is reproduction necessary? It is necessary because reproduction enables continuity of species generation after generation. So, individuals or organisms come and they continue with their particular life period or time period, and then they die, right? So you need to continue the race or the species, and to do so, the fundamental life process, that is reproduction, is of prime importance. So what does reproduction do? Reproduction sustains life on the earth. Reproduction is the mechanism of life to carry life forward. Now, we move on to the next part, that is types of reproduction. The basic categories here is, you can divide it into 2, asexual and sexual mode of reproduction. So what do you understand by asexual mode of reproduction and what is sexual mode of reproduction? It's listed out over here. You can go through it. But basic difference I would say is in asexual reproduction, there are no gametes involved. So you don't have the formation of gametes through the cell division known as meiosis. Whereas in sexual reproduction, you have the formation of gametes, and gametes are formed with the help of the cell division that is known as meiosis. So what does asexual reproduction do? Asexual reproduction only is involved in increasing the number of species, whereas sexual reproduction not only increases the number of species, but also brings about variation, and that variation is essential for evolutionary significance. It has evolutionary significance. So, in asexual reproduction, you see a single parent is involved, whereas in sexual reproduction, you require two parents, a male and a female. In asexual reproduction, there is no formation or fusion of the gametes. In sexual reproduction, there is formation and fusion of the gametes. In asexual reproduction, the mode of cell division is mitosis, whereas in sexual reproduction, it is meiosis. And finally, in asexual reproduction, there is no genetic variation, and therefore it doesn't have evolutionary significance. But in sexual reproduction, there is variation because of this cell division known as meiosis, which brings about evolution. The different methods of asexual reproduction are as follows. We have fission, spore formation, regeneration, also known as fragmentation, budding, and vegetative propagation. Let's go through each one of them now. Fission is divided into three types. Fission is simple binary fission, transverse binary fission, and longitudinal binary fission. What you see over here is simple binary fission. For example, amoeba. Amoeba divides by simple binary fission, wherein the cytoplasm and the nucleus is divided. But in paramecium, you see transverse binary fission. Why is it called transverse? It's because the paramecium is going to be dividing itself transversely. And that's why the term transverse binary fission. So when it divides transversely, the cytoplasmic contents and the nuclear contents are equally distributed between the two daughter paramecia. And you have the third type, which is called as longitudinal binary fission, which is seen in Euglena. In Euglena, it is not going to be transverse fission, but it is going to be longitudinal binary fission. The next one is spore formation. Now, spore formation is the method of asexual reproduction, which is very common in algae and fungi. So, if they have to reproduce asexually, they are going to be doing it so by spore formation. Usually, these spores are motile, flagellated spores, and these are known as your zoospores. So you have zoospores here in Chlamydomonas, and you have another type of spore formation which is called as conidia formation, which is seen in fungus, especially the group called Ascomycetes, for example, Penicillium. So conidia formation, zoospore formation come under the category of spore formation in asexual mode of reproduction. The third type of asexual method is regeneration, also known as fragmentation. So in regeneration or fragmentation, you can see a part of the body is enough to regenerate the whole organism back again. So if I divide this planaria, it's a flatworm, if I divide this planaria into pieces, each piece has the potential to become a new whole complete planaria. That is known as regeneration or fragmentation. Then you have budding, which is very commonly seen in Hydra. Hydra is a coelenterate or a cnidarian, and it reproduces asexually by buds. The process is known as budding. And finally, you have the last method of asexual reproduction, which is vegetative propagation. Now, vegetative propagation is an asexual method where the parts of the plant other than the seed are going to be involved in propagation or multiplication of that particular plant species. I'll repeat again. I said in vegetative propagation, you see parts of the plant other than the seed are involved in propagation or multiplication. So what could be the parts that could be involved in vegetative propagation? These structures or units are going to be called as vegetative propagules, and they could be parts like the stem, the root, the creeper or the leaf. So these could be categorized as vegetative propagules. So you can see a list of vegetative propagules here under vegetative propagation. So you have parts of the stem which can behave as vegetative propagules and can bring about vegetative propagation. You have rhizome, for example, ginger, turmeric. Tubers, for example, potato. Corm is another type of an underground stem bringing about vegetative propagation. For example, crocus, colocasia, gladiolus, amorphophallus. Bulbs like your onion and garlic, and suckers like your mint and chrysanthemum. So all these plants, they undergo vegetative propagation by the modification of their underground stems. And that is how they propagate and perennate. You have the next, which is by creepers. So vegetative propagation by creepers. What are creepers? Creepers are parts of the stem itself which trail along the surface. So by creepers you have runners, example grass, stolon, strawberry, offset, which is like a runner but seen in aquatic plants like Pistia and Eichhornia. By leaves, vegetative propagation is seen in Bryophyllum and Begonia, that is with the help of adventitious buds. And bulbils, for example, agave plant. And last you have with the help of roots. Propagation by roots is seen in sweet potato and tapioca with the help of the modified tuberous roots. I hope you have understood this, students, with the examples. So let's move on forward in understanding the next unit, the next subtopic. But before that, you can quickly go through the diagrams here of the various vegetative propagules that are mentioned in the slide. The rhizome of ginger, the tuber of potato, have a look at it. This is an offset. So this is the creeping stem that is involved in bringing about vegetative propagation, seen in water hyacinth, also known as the terror of Bengal. You have the others. This is the bulbil, the chrysanthemum, and the leaf buds in Bryophyllum. So quickly let us revise or go through the asexual reproductive structures again. We have zoospores seen in Chlamydomonas, which is an algae. Zoospores are flagellated motile spores that are asexually produced. Conidia are seen in Penicillium. Penicillium is a fungus belonging to the group called Ascomycetes. Conidia are exogenous spores that are borne on stalks called conidiophores. So these are exogenous spores known as conidia in Penicillium. You have bud formation, budding in Hydra. And you have gemule formation. Now what are gemules? Gemules are asexual reproductive structures seen in the groups of animals known as sponges. Sponges are the primitive or the simplest known animals. They are marine forms, they are sedentary in lifestyle, and these reproduce asexually and sexually as well. So asexual reproduction would be with the help of gemule formation, which are also your endogenous buds. So this mode of reproduction could commonly be called as endogenous budding, because gemules are like buds which are formed in a mass of cells or a group of cells enclosed or covered by a sheath. Moving on to sexual reproduction now. Now, sexual reproduction we have already discussed. We will quickly go through the meaning of sexual reproduction. The reproduction in which the gametes of two parents fuse to give rise to a zygote which develops to form a new organism. So here you have to remember two things. One is there is union of the gametes which are formed by two parents, preferably one male and one female. Now, these gametes unite or fertilize. In other words, they undergo syngamy to bring about the formation of a zygote. And that zygote undergoes embryogenesis to give rise or to develop into a new organism. So the result is the offspring that is not identical to the parents or amongst themselves. Now why is it so? This is already been told to you because sexual reproduction takes place with the help of the cell division known as meiosis, and meiosis is responsible to bring about variation, and that variation is seen in the offsprings which are not identical to the parents or amongst themselves. Now, an organism, already mentioned to you earlier, when comes on the earth, when it is born or formed, it undergoes through these phases, which are a part and parcel of the lifespan. Lifespan is a time period between birth and natural death. So between birth and natural death, you have these phases that are included. So you have, after birth, the organism enters into the juvenile phase. Now, juvenile phase is a phase where the organism grows and develops. Now, once it grows and develops, it enters into the next stage or the next phase, which is called as the reproductive phase, where the organism is reproductively active to form gametes and bring about reproduction, sexual reproduction. And after the reproductive phase, the organism enters into the aging phase or senescence. So we use the word senescence in plants, whereas aging is the term that we use in animals. So senescence or aging phase would be the end of the reproductive phase, which is then finally followed by the death of the organism. How do you know that a plant, or for that matter an animal, has finished or completed juvenile phase and entered into the reproductive phase? Let's take the plants first. So how do you know that the plant has moved on or finished with the juvenile phase and entered into the reproductive phase? How do you know that? Can you think of the answer? The answer is very simple. A plant will show the vegetative stage, that is the growth period and the development period where it grows vegetatively. And the moment it enters into the reproductive phase, and how do you know that it has entered into the reproductive phase? We know it because it starts blooming. The plant starts blooming or produces flowers, especially in angiosperms, right? So that is the beginning of the reproductive phase in flowering plants. Now, moving on, you have plants which could be categorized into three categories: annuals, perennials, and biennials. So what are annual plants? Annual plants are plants which complete their entire life cycle, that is from birth to death, in 1 year. So that's why they are called as annual. So you can see over here, they will germinate, they will grow, that is the juvenile phase or the vegetative phase in plants. They will flower, the reproductive phase, and then after flowering, producing seeds, they will die. They complete their entire life cycle in 1 season or 1 year, and these are known as your annual plants. So what are perennial plants? If you can see here, perennial plants, they continue their life. They don't have a particular time period, but I would say they keep on continuing with their life cycle, wherein they will germinate, they will grow, they will flower, and they undergo a dormant phase or a dormant period. So when favorable season or favorable conditions arise, they will start growing and developing further so that they can bloom or flower, reproductive phase, followed by, again, period of dormancy. So this continues for years, and therefore these plants are called as your perennial plants. For example, your mangoes, coconut trees, etc. These are all your perennials. And then you have your biennial plants. Biennial plants are plants which complete their life cycle, or they have a lifespan of 2 years. That means they require 2 seasons. So the first year they will grow vegetatively. And then the following year they will bloom and they will produce seeds, followed by the death of the plant. So these are known as your biennial plants. For example, your beets are biennials. What about annuals? Example could be your cereals like your rice, wheat, etc. Now, we have some fascinating plants also. And to list, I have put two types of plants here on the slide. We have this bamboo plant. This bamboo flowers after every 50 to 100 years. Have a look at this. This is the bamboo with its full bloom, and it is known to flower after every 50 to 100 years. These are some fascinating facts in biology, in the kingdom of plants. And you have another one, Neela Kuranji. It's scientifically called Strobilanthes kuntiana. Now, Neela Kuranji flowers once in 12 years. It was in 2006, recently it was in 2018 that it bloomed. This is the patch of flowers that you see of Kuranji or Neela Kuranji, which has bloomed, and it blooms every 12 years. So what happens during these years when it is not in its bloom? It is dormant. It is not dead, but rather it is in its dormant period. So latest was in 2018, where the entire Western Ghats of India was in its full bloom with these type of flowers belonging to the category or plant, which is Neela Kuranji, Strobilanthes kuntiana. Now what about animals? We spoke about plants. So plants, they grow vegetatively, and when it is the time for their reproductive phase, they will start producing flowers, because flower is the sexual or the reproductive organ which carries the reproductive structures in it, right? Now what about animals? How do animals continue with reproduction? Or how do you know that the animals have moved on from their juvenile phase to their reproductive phase? Now for that, we have in animals a term known as puberty, especially in human beings. So what is puberty? Attainment of sexual maturity is known as puberty. So how do you know that a female or a male has attained puberty? There will be a lot of sexual hormonal changes that will take place in the body that is going to ensure that the juvenile phase is over and the organism or the human being has moved on to its next phase, which is the reproductive phase. So we have the cycle known as the menstrual cycle that sets in primate females. So all primate females will show the cycle known as the menstrual cycle. For example, monkeys, apes, and human females. Whereas in the other non-primate females also, they have a cycle known as the estrous cycle. Now, this estrous cycle is seen in non-primate females like your cows, dogs, sheep, rat, goat, etc. So these are your non-primate females which show the cycle known as estrous cycle, and the primate females show the cycle known as the menstrual cycle. So these cycles tell us that the organism or the individual is sexually active and is ready to produce gametes which can fuse or fertilize. So what are the other features of the menstrual cycle and the estrous cycle? Let's have a look at the menstrual cycle. It consists of the menstrual phase, proliferative phase, and the luteal phase. So these are phases that occur in every menstrual cycle. So menstrual cycle is a cyclical change that occurs in the reproductive system of every primate female every month. So during that month, this menstrual cycle will go through different subphases: menstrual, proliferative, luteal phase. Whereas in estrous cycle, in non-primate females, you don't have these subcategories. It is a short period of estrus or heat, wherein the female is very sexually active to bring about the release of gametes and fertilization to take place. In menstrual cycle, there is the blood flow. The endometrial lining gets sludged out. Whereas in estrous cycle, there is no blood flow. Does that mean the endometrial lining is not getting thick, waiting for the pregnancy? Yes, it does. But what happens is there is no flow in blood because the blood is getting reabsorbed by the body itself. But in the case of menstrual cycle in primate females, there is a period called as the bleeding phase or the menstrual phase where the blood flows for a period of about 3 to 5 days in the cycle. Finally, menstrual cycle, such animals fall in the category of continuous breeders, whereas in estrus cycle, these animals, they fall in the category of seasonal breeders. So you need to understand what do you mean by continuous breeders and seasonal breeders now. So who are seasonal and continuous breeders? Continuous breeders are breeders which can continuously breed throughout the year. So they don't have a particular season of mating or breeding. Whereas seasonal breeders, they have a particular season or time frame for mating or breeding. And that time frame or period of mating or breeding is this period wherein they experience a kind of a wave in their body, which is the heat wave, also known as the estrus or heat. That's why these are called as seasonal breeders, whereas your continuous breeders fall in the category that is showing menstrual cycle. Okay, I hope this is clear. Now moving on to understanding the sexual reproduction events. In sexual reproduction, we have 3 events, and you can categorize them as pre-fertilization events, fertilization or syngamy, and finally you have post-fertilization. Now, pre-fertilization, you can divide it into 2 subcategories, gametogenesis and gamete transfer. So what do you see in pre-fertilization? In pre-fertilization, the body of the organism is getting ready for the next event, which is called as fertilization or syngamy. So how is the body getting prepared or ready? By producing gametes. The process is called as gametogenesis. Split the word into 2, genesis meaning to form, and gamete means to form the gametes. So formation of gametes takes place, and once the gametes are formed, the gametes need to be transferred, students. So forming the gametes is one part of the event. You need to transfer the gametes to the right place or the right location, and that's why pre-fertilization event is essential to bring about fertilization, and it includes gametogenesis and gamete transfer. Let's try to understand the pre-fertilization changes, the first one being gametogenesis. Now, gametogenesis is a process of formation of gametes. Now, have a look at this term, haploid. Haploid meaning unpaired set of chromosomes. That means the gamete is carrying unpaired set of chromosomes. I'll give you an example here. Human beings have 46 chromosomes. That means every cell in our body is made up of 46 chromosomes inside its nucleus, which is how many pairs? 23 pairs. But at the time of gamete formation, and where does gamete formation take place in humans? In humans, gamete formation takes place in gonads. So which are the gonads in human beings? In a male, we have the testes, and in a female, we have the ovaries. So in the testes, gametes are formed. So what is the gamete that gets formed in the testes called? It's called as a sperm. And how is a sperm created? Sperm is created through a cell division called meiosis, also known as reductional division. And why is it called reductional division? It's because the chromosome number gets halved or reduced. What was the number? 46. But what is the number after meiosis to form the sperm? 23. So this becomes a haploid gamete or an unpaired gamete having unpaired set of chromosomes. Same thing you have in females. You have the gonads called ovaries, and in the ovary you are going to be having the formation of egg, which is again a haploid egg, which is carrying only 23 chromosomes and not 46. So gametes now could either be homogametes, also known as isogametes, or heterogametes. Homo means similar. Hetero means dissimilar. So if you look at these 2 gametes, they look the same. But mind you, one is a male gamete, the other one is a female gamete. But they look the same, they appear the same. Phenotypically, they resemble each other. But one is a positive strain, the other one is a negative strain, a male and a female. But these are known as what? Homogametes, or also known as isogametes. These are isogametes or homogametes seen in Cladophora, which is a green algae. You have over here 2 dissimilar gametes or heterogametes. This is a large gamete, which is the egg, and this is the sperm or enterozoid. That's the right term to use. And this enterozoid is flagellated. Can you see a tiny flagella for it? Yes. This is non-motile gamete, which is large, the egg, and this is a flagellated motile gamete, which is very small in size. So these are dissimilar gametes which are found in fucus. Fucus is also an algae. It is a brown algae. And again here, the third figure, you have dissimilar gametes. One is long spindle shaped. The other one is oval or round or spherical in shape. This is non-motile. These are motile because they carry the flagellum. So this is the sperm in human beings and this is the ovum or the egg in human. Dissimilar gametes, also known as heterogametes. So these are the two categories of gametes, iso and hetero. Let's continue with gametogenesis. So once the gametes are formed, what do you do next? What happens next is the transfer of gametes. Gamete transfer would be wherein the male and female gamete must be brought together. If you look here in this figure, I told you this is non-motile gamete. Again, this is also a non-motile gamete. So it is going to be remaining stationary. It will not move. And where is it found? In the female body. Whereas these are motile gametes. So these have a role to play wherein they have to get transferred from one place to the other. That means they have to move, they have to travel and reach the non-motile gamete to bring about fusion. That is known as gamete transfer. And how does gamete transfer take place? Gamete transfer could take place in some organisms, okay, with the help of water. So water acts as a medium for transportation of the gamete. In algae, bryophytes and pteridophytes, water is the medium for gamete transfer. Remember last year's topic, students? Bryophytes and pteridophytes are called amphibians of the plant kingdom. Why? Because they can live in water as well as on land. That's why they're called as amphibians of the plant kingdom. Now, if they can live on land, why do they require water? It's essential for reproduction. And which part of reproduction here? Sexual part of reproduction, wherein water is of prime importance for the flagellated gametes, that is the male gamete, to swim and reach the female gamete. Without the water, these will not be able to bring about fertilization. That is algae, bryophytes and pteridophytes. In higher plants, how do you achieve gamete transfer? We have pollination. In especially flowering plants, you have pollination. Pollination could be self-pollination or cross-pollination. Cross-pollination could be achieved either abiotically or biotically. Now, let's learn some terms which are going to be helping you in the next two chapters, students. So, I'm deviating a little bit from gamete transfer and we will move on to fertilization a little later. But now let's understand sexuality in plants. To understand sexuality in plants, we need to know certain terms. Now these terms are very commonly used in the next two chapters. So let's get familiar with the terms. Homothallic or monoecious means the same, but the terms are used for different plants. Let us understand this. Homothallic is a term that is used either for algae or fungi, whereas monoecious would be preferably used for angiosperms. So what is homothallic or monoecious? It is also, in other words, bisexual. So what is bisexual? Bisexual condition is a condition where you have both male and female reproductive organs on the same body or organism. On the same body or in the same organism, if you have both the male and female reproductive organs, that particular condition is going to be called homothallic or monoecious. So homothallic we use preferably in fungi and algae, and monoecious we use for plants. But both these mean bisexual condition. In this, both male and female reproductive structures are present in a single individual. Now, the opposite of it is heterotelic or dioecious. So what will be heterotelic or dioecious? Unisexual condition. Unisexual condition is a condition wherein the male and female reproductive parts or organs are in different flowers or individuals. Since we are discussing about plants, let's focus only on plants. So we see that in heterothelous or dioecious condition, we have male and female reproductive parts which are found in different flowers. So you have a male flower and you have a female flower. Hibiscus is a bisexual flower, so it will fall under the category of monoecious. Whereas papaya, it has two types of flowers. It produces two flowers, a male flower and a female flower. And it is borne on two separate plants, students. So the papaya plant is a unisexual plant. It produces unisexual flowers, also known as dioecious condition. Getting me? So here you have male flowers, also known as staminate flowers, which will only bear the stamens. And what are stamens? The reproductive parts which are responsible to produce pollen grains. And female flowers are called pistillate flowers, which will only bear the pistil. And what is a pistil made up of? It is again a reproductive part made up of the ovary, style and the stigma. And what does the ovary contain? It contains the egg inside it. So these two terms, I hope they are clear. Homothallic or heterothallic is a condition which is seen in algae or fungi, whereas monoecious and dioecious terms will be using for plants. Homothallic or monoecious is bisexual condition. Heterothallic or dioecious condition is unisexual condition. You have the examples here. Monoecious plants, for example, cucurbita here. And again, another example that I could give you is your coconut, which is a monoecious plant. Dioecious plants, papaya and your date palm, these are dioecious. They have male and female flowers borne separately on separate plants. Now we move on to sexuality in animals. We saw sexuality in plants. We will try to understand sexuality in animals. So you can categorize sexuality in animals in two categories, bisexual or unisexual. Bisexual condition could also be called as hermaphrodites. Okay, we have earthworm, tapeworm, we have sponges and we have a leech here. All these four animals, these are hermaphrodites or bisexual. What do you mean by hermaphrodite or bisexual? They have both the male and female reproductive structures in the same body. Whereas here we have cockroach, we have rat, we have here the peacock and the peahen. Here we can see these are unisexual animals. That means you can see sexual dimorphism also in them. You can easily differentiate who is a male cockroach from a female cockroach. You can also differentiate here a peacock from a peahen. These are unisexual creatures or animals. We move on to the second event, which is syngamy and fertilization, also known as fertilization or syngamy. So what does syngamy result in? So when a male gamete by gamete transfer reaches the female gamete, what you get is now the fusion of gametes, which is known as fertilization or syngamy. This results in restoring back the diploid nature of the organism. A haploid male gamete fuses with the haploid female gamete, N plus N coming together, resulting in the condition 2N, which is diploid. So the zygote restores back the diploid nature of the individual or the organism. And this is achieved through fusion or fertilization. So we also have a type of a special syngamy or fertilization, which is seen in some organisms. So there are some special organisms or animals like rotifers, honeybees, some lizards and birds like turkeys, where the female gametes develop into an organism without fertilization. So here there is no fertilization, but you notice that the female gamete behaves as a zygote, and this particular zygote, which is a haploid zygote, will undergo changes and development to behave or form a new individual. That process is called as parthenogenesis. Now students, bear in mind, parthenogenesis and parthenocarpy is different. Parthenogenesis is a term for animals, and parthenocarpy is a term which we use for plants. The principle is the same, the concept is more or less the same, but it is seen in, one is in plants, the other one is seen in animals. So this parthenogenesis phenomenon is seen in animals where the unfertilized egg becomes the individual or the organism, whereas in plants, the unfertilized ovum or the egg inside the ovule without fertilization gets transformed into a new organism. That is a seed followed by the germination of the seed to give rise to a new plant. So parthenocarpy is going to be producing fruits which are seedless. Why no seeds? Because there was no fertilization or syngamy. Now moving back to syngamy or fertilization. So once the male gamete fuses with the female gamete, fusion takes place and you have the formation of the zygote. Now, fertilization could be achieved in two ways: external fertilization, internal fertilization. External fertilization is the fertilization where fertilization is going to be outside the female body, and internal fertilization would be inside the female body. Now, external fertilization and internal fertilization have their advantages and disadvantages also. But let's try to have a look at the external and internal fertilization, the differences that are listed on the slide here. In external fertilization, since the fertilization occurs outside the female body, the gametes are laid outside the body, fusion takes place outside, there is low survival rate of the embryo or the eggs. So the egg survival rate is going to be low as well as the fertilized embryos. The internal fertilization, on the other hand, they have high survival rate of the embryos. Why? Because they are well protected inside the body of the female. In external fertilization, for this reason now, since there is low survival rate of the eggs or the gametes and the embryo, what you see is a large number of gametes are going to be produced. Whereas in internal fertilization, less number of gametes are going to be produced. Why? Because chances of survival are very high in the case of internal fertilization. So in external fertilization, successful in moist environment only. That means this kind of fertilization is always going to be noticed where you have aquatic environment. Whereas internal fertilization is going to be successful even in harsh environmental conditions. This fertilization external occurs in algae, fishes, amphibians, mollusks and crustaceans, whereas internal fertilization is seen in bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms, angiosperms and reptiles, birds and mammals. We move on to the last part, which is the post-fertilization events now. Now post-fertilization events, I can categorize them in two: in plants and in animals. So let's try to understand the post-fertilization events in plant students. So what do you notice now once fertilization or syngamy occurs in plants? The first thing that happens is the formation of the endosperm. Now what is endosperm? Endosperm is a nutritive tissue. This nutritive tissue is responsible to nourish the developing embryo. So before the embryo development can start, the endosperm development should start and endosperm should be formed and be ready to nourish the developing embryo. So in plants, post-fertilization event begins with the formation of the endosperm or the nutritive tissue, followed by embryogenesis, that is the development of the embryo, which is followed by the transformation of the seed from the ovule, and finally we see the ovary gets transformed into the fruit, protecting the seeds inside it. So these are the events that will take place in plants, which are post-fertilization events. And in animals we see, first and foremost, you will notice that fusion of the gametes takes place. After the fusion, what you see is the formation of a diploid zygote. This diploid zygote starts undergoing changes now, which is embryogenesis. So it changes from a single-celled zygote to a multi-celled body, which is known as a blastocyst in humans or blastula in other animals. This blastula now starts rearranging itself. What is blastula? It is a group of cells And these group of cells now, they arrange themselves in 3 different germ layers: ectoderm, mesoderm, endoderm. These 3 germ layers are now responsible to form the organs of the animal body. So organogenesis starts. Am I clear? Did you understand all this? Now, I want you to look at this slide now, where I have listed out the 3 differences between oviparous animals, viviparous and ovoviviparous. So oviparous organisms, viviparous organisms and ovoviviparous organisms, let's understand what they are. In ovipary, we have the organism that lay eggs. In vivipary, the organism give direct birth. For example, in ovipary, we have birds, insects, reptiles, amphibians and fishes, whereas in vivipary, we have some of the reptiles, fishes, amphibians and mammals. But you have another category here called ovovivipary. Now what is this ovovivipary? Here the organism lays eggs. The eggs are laid, they are fertilized internally only. That means they are not laid outside. The eggs are laid in the body of the female. Fertilization is internal. That means the male gametes are going to be internally fertilizing the female gamete, which is the eggs. And these eggs hatch inside the body of the female. That is in the reproductive tract of the female. So what comes out of the reproductive tract of the female are going to be young ones of that species. That's why this condition is called ovovivipary condition. Now, what type of fertilization? In ovipary, it could either be internal or external fertilization. In ovovivipary and vivipary, it is always going to be internal fertilization. Now, I'll give you an example here of ovipary where it is internal fertilization, for example, birds. Whereas external fertilization would be frog. So frogs, they lay the gametes outside the body and these gametes will fertilize externally. Whereas in birds, fertilization is internal, then the eggs are going to be laid outside. Laying of the eggs, yes, in the first 2 cases, and vivipary, there is no laying of eggs. Nutrients to the developing embryo, these 2 will be from the egg yolk, whereas in vivipary it is going to be from the mother. Placental connection, in these 2 cases there is no placenta formation. In the 3rd category of viviparous animals, there is placenta formation. Embryo gets connected to the placenta for nourishment. And finally, the embryo development is outside the mother's body in oviparous condition, that is in the egg. In ovovivipary and vivipary, the development of the embryo takes place inside the body of the mother. So that was the end of the chapter, students. Now, let us try to go through some of the previous year's board questions in this chapter. Before we move on to understanding the pattern, okay, of questions for this chapter, I want you to understand one thing, that the first 2 chapters in this unit, that is reproduction, are combined. So chapter 1, which is reproduction in organisms, and chapter 2, sexual reproduction in flowering plants, carries a combined total of 6 marks. So these 6 marks could either be divided as 2 plus 2, 2 plus 4 or 1 plus 5. So the first chapter that we have just finished today can carry 1 or 2 marks for your board exam. So if you look at the previous year's question papers, you will see that it is usually 1 mark questions that have been asked. And have a look at the questions. In this chapter, you have the diagram, that is figure 1.5, A, B and C, that can be asked for your board exam. So make sure you practice drawing this figure, figure 1.5, A, B and C. A is the isogametes seen in cladophora. B diagram is the heterogametes in fucus, and C diagram is the heterogametes in human beings. So the question in February 2020, the recent question paper, we had a question, draw a neat diagram of heterogametes in human beings. And that's your figure 1.5c. The next question you can see, in an experiment, 5 female turkey birds were kept isolated in a cage without any male turkey bird to avoid mating. In spite of this, 3 more turkey bird offsprings were born. Give reason. 1 mark question. Answer is very simple. The term is parthenogenesis. Remember students, there were many of them who have given the answer as parthenocarpy. So don't get confused. This is with respect to turkey bird. It's an animal. So we use the term parthenogenesis and not parthenocarpy. Then, which of the following is not true about the fruit fly Drosophila? A, it completes its life cycle in about 2 weeks. It is true. It has many types of hereditary variations. It is again true. Okay, that's why it is used in genetics as an experimental organism. It is a hermaphrodite. It is not true. It is not a hermaphrodite or a bisexual form. It is a unisexual form. So that's the answer C. And the D, it can be easily grown in the laboratory. Yes, it can be grown in the laboratory easily. So it is again true. So what is the answer? The correct answer is C, which is not true. It is not a hermaphrodite. It is a unisexual form. A moss plant Funaria produce very few male gametes as compared to the female gametes. Predict the effect of this on fertilization. What will happen? If the Funaria plant produces very few male gametes, Funaria, it's a bryophyte, and bryophytes require water medium of transport for transportation. And you know, the chances of the male gametes now to reach the female gamete in the water medium, okay, are very less. So more the number of male gametes produced, better would be the chances for the male gametes to reach the female gamete. Isn't it so? So what is the need here? The need here is to produce more number of male gametes. But in this question here, the male plant, the moss plant Funaria produced very few gametes. So what would be the effect of this on fertilization? The chances of fertilization would be less or nil. In birds like turkey, the female gamete undergoes development to form new organisms without fertilization. Identify the phenomenon. Again, parthenogenesis. Dr. Meenakshi in a laboratory developed number of frogs for research work from a single parent which are morphologically and genetically similar. What method do you think Dr. Meenakshi adopted for the above process? Asexual reproduction or cloning? That's the method. Adventitious buds, buds arise from dash. Adventitious buds arise from bryophyllum. And which of the following plant produces vegetatively by rhizome? It is which plant that produces by rhizome? It's your banana. And finally, in March 2012, we had the question, draw the isogametes of Cladophora. So I hope you have understood the chapter, students. All the very best to you. Study well, go through the chapter, read the summary as well that is given in your textbook. Practice your diagram, figure 1.5, A, B and C, and try to solve some questions on it. Thank you for watching and listening. Have a nice day.
Prudent Scholars, powered by Lupin Pharmaceuticals.